Welcome to the Elixir podcast, where we ask people from all walks of life and from around the world what their favourite poem is and why it's important to them, why or how it speaks to their heart. If you have a poem that you would like to share and would like to appear on the podcast, please contact me at helenwing@me.com. Hello and welcome to today's Elixir Poetry Podcast. Today we're going to be talking to Christopher Hamilton, who is an actor, a writer, and a TV production person. Hello, Chris.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. What are you going to read to us today?
So I am going to start with a little-known piece by a guy called William Shakespeare, I think that's his name. And it's a small one of his pieces. It's not very well known. It's called... It's something about this guy called Toby or not Toby, I think. But I'm going to go with to be or not to be, and
that is brilliant. And I think it's high time we had some Shakespeare, and high time we actually had probably Shakespeare's most famous soliloquy.
I know. I'm jumping in at the deep end, shall we say, with this one.
Okay, would you like to read it to us or recite it to us?
Yeah, let's give this a read. To be or not to be. That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing, end them. To die, to sleep, no more. And by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil. Must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long a life.
Thank you.
Oh, it's just so powerful, isn't it?
It is so powerful. And why? Tell me, why have you chosen this? What does it mean to you?
Well, in recent years, I've kind of found myself walking around the house and reciting it to myself without even really realizing it. There's something about the power behind it, about how well known it is, that almost it feels as if I'm casting a spell when I'm saying it. But I think, for me, because it holds so much weight and gravitas, and it's probably, to be or not to be, is probably one of the most famous things ever written down that everybody knows. It's quite nice to be able to say it to myself just for myself, I think. And it sort of demystifies it a bit for me.
How do you respond to it? Do you respond to it with a positive to be, I'm deciding to be, or do you, how
do I lean on the not to be?
Decide, no, I'm going to have this ghostly existence that resembles
such a good question.
Life in a post-life dream.
Yeah, that's such a good question. For me, there's a big part of acting where, a lot of actors, they really try and force the emotions out. There's method acting where people remember traumatic moments in their own lives to bring that trauma to the stage. And I think traditionally a lot of people were very in line with that way of acting. Big time actors like Daniel Day-Lewis really embrace that. But more and more it's becoming less out of fashion, particularly in drama schools. It's really changing. It's what drama schools are kind of saying, maybe don't bring up, your trauma on the stage, and maybe that's not great for your mental health.
Really? Is that why they're doing that?
Yeah, more and more. And there's also a feeling of, when you have an actor on stage who's bringing up their own trauma, they are focused in on themselves and what they are going through. And it's harder for them to kind of get rid of those emotions when they leave the stage, because they are bringing up, a lost loved one that they've experienced.
Yeah, and maybe they're stealing the emotion from the audience, if you like.
That's the thing. And also, crucially as well, their scene partner as well. A lot of my training was looking at these things called the circles of attention. And the first circle being you only have attention on yourself.
Mm.
So you might see an actor on stage and they're doing a monologue and all the attention is inward.
Mm.
And sometimes it's quite hard to put your finger on, but you feel it. You kind of feel that they're doing that. And then there's the second circle of attention where an actor is really giving everything to the other person on stage and they're not even focusing on themselves. Everything is going to the other actor. And that I love to see because then it really becomes a game of tennis.
And then you realise that acting is totally collaborative.
Totally, 100%.
There's a famous drama teacher who taught these circles of attention. I can't remember her name. Do you remember who that is?
It's Patsy Rodenberg.
Yeah.
Yeah. Her circles of attention, yeah.
So interesting.
It's really fantastic. But I guess I've gone off on a slight tangent here, as I often do. But I think, especially with something like To Be or Not to Be, an actor can really get in their heads. And I think, even if you're thinking Hamlet is very much in his head at this moment, so you could play it that way and you could try and bring up your own trauma. I mean, everyone's experienced, death and difficulties like that. So I could bring my own experiences to that.
Mm.
Or something slightly different, which I found with To Be or Not to Be, is actually allowing the words to affect you for what they are. As if you're sat at home watching a really sad film. You're not, it's made up and you're not feeling those emotions, but it's bringing something out in you. And at some point a couple of years back, To Be or Not to Be, something in it just actually made me feel very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't coming from me. It wasn't like I was forcing myself to feel that. Something about it just suddenly spoke to me and it made me feel incredibly sad.
Yeah.
But not to the point of, I can't get out of this.
No, more about the human condition, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think
the way we face our mortality and so on.
Yeah. There's something in the flow, the iambic pentameter in the first couple of lines that suddenly gets stopped on the to die. And it's like, you really feel da-dum.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true.
I think it's such amazing writing. And I think because we hold it in such high esteem, I think we often hold it away from us.
Yeah.
And it's something quite hard to approach.
And yet, of course, the reason why it is, in my opinion, the most famous soliloquy is because it's actually really easy to detach it from the Hamlet story. And because the words are so abstract, you can, if you like, ingest them and internalize them for yourself, because they can mean something to everyone who reads them in different ways. And like you say, your own life will be drawn up into those thoughts. So I know you live with two brothers. Do they hear you going around quoting Shakespeare in the kitchen?
I don't think so, no. I think quite often I actually say it, because obviously these are meant to be performed to huge audiences. Quite often I almost find myself saying these things under my breath, almost like a bit of a
mantra.
Yeah, like a mantra. And it's quite interesting to feel these words that were meant to be performed in quite a small internal way, I think, and because you aren't just saying it for yourself. And there's a couple of other pieces of Shakespeare. There's other parts of Hamlet that I also know that stick with me. There's a sonnet that really resonates with me, and I've learned quite a few different Shakespeare monologues and soliloquies, and I think there's something really fascinating that happens when you actually find the courage to demystify it all a bit. I know a lot of actors who will not touch Shakespeare because it's so high up there and it feels so intangible and you really can't bring it to yourself. But I think it takes a lot of courage to kind of bring it down to you and say,
absolutely,
yeah, I'm going to tackle this.
One of the things that strikes me about your story, Chris, is that in the olden days, we all were taught to learn poetry and speeches off by heart. Right? And we do this less and less. But you as an actor, you're carrying around inside you these poems and speeches that can be presumably a great comfort to you. And I can remember doing a little assembly for some children who were learning a poem, and ask them to think about what it means to learn something by heart, that you
actually literally carrying it in your heart, and you carry it with you everywhere, and you know it forever. And these words, these poems, this soliloquy, they become touchstones for your sense of self and the sense of, validity, if you like, or permanence in your identity, if you have something learnt by heart, So I can't think of a better one than this soliloquy to have in your heart.
Well, that's brilliant as well, because I've never even thought about carrying it in your heart. I think that's fascinating. Of course, when you do learn something off by heart,
that's what we call it, by heart.
Yeah, it's in here, in this emotion area, rather than up here in the brain.
That's clearly what that is for your to be or not to be. You can recite it without thinking about it. And very, very few of us have these poems stored. Grandparents often have many, many poems, I think I've only got one.
Oh, yeah.
The only one I've got that I just can't forget is this poem called Erat Ora by Ezra Pound, which I can, recite to myself, because it's about the beauty of life and how you can capture it in a moment. I can quote it to you if you like.
Go ahead.
It goes, "Thank you, whatever comes. And then she turned, and as the ray of sun on hanging flowers fades when the wind hath lifted them aside, went swiftly from me. Nay, whatever comes. 1 hour was sunlit, and the most high gods may not make boast of any better thing than to have watched that hour as it passed." And so that poem is all about, for me, it's like when everything is terrible, it reminds me to think about how there have always been beautiful moments in your life and that they can stay with you and you can keep them. I mean, just as this soliloquy actually is a reminder that the human condition is similar for everybody, right? Everybody ultimately has the choice to live. And obviously some people get that taken away from them by oppressive, horrible governments or disaster. But in general, ordinary people, you have that choice every day to grab life.
And I think that's very important as well with this piece. I think, especially within the context of the play, it can be seen as, and it definitely is, a piece on contemplating suicide. And people do very much lean in on the not to be, because he really is considering the not to be. And is, unfortunately as well, he's giving very good reasons for both, I think. But it's interesting to look at this piece in a way that it can be quite life-affirming, that it can give you the strength to go on. And ultimately, Hamlet, I would say, decides to be, because he doesn't end his life at this point. Spoilers. Well, later on. It gets very, very messy, as all these do.
They all die in the end, don't they?
But either way, he continues. He's going up against such incredible odds in this play. And I was lucky enough to play Hamlet at drama school. Wow. And interestingly, this piece, this probably the most iconic piece of Shakespeare, we didn't perform it. It was removed from our production of Hamlet. My director felt as if it happened. She's always felt as if it happens at quite a weird part of the play, which I'm inclined to agree with. And also she just felt like it was too long and it slows everything down. And it actually does. It kind of very much slows down. And
because it's so famous, it becomes a real focus point.
Absolutely,
on it, right? It doesn't flow in.
And there were 3 Hamlets. There were 3 of us, and we were all kind of fighting over it anyway. So because it's quite good that none of us who will say to be or not to be? Who will say that is the question?
You've had to do it as a chorus or something.
Yeah. But we did have this, we did a lot of Hamlet's other soliloquies, and the 3 of us divided them into different parts of Hamlet's psyche. I think it works really, really well. We kind of went into it and we were like, oh, can we do something very Freudian here? Is this line the id? Is this line the ego? Is this line the super ego? And we actually found quite a few moments that really reflected that in different speeches that Hamlet has. And instead, these soliloquies became these lovely scenes between 3 actors.
Oh, how lovely!
It made it really exciting, and it made these soliloquies very, very active as well.
Yeah, it's like you're seeing them for anew.
Yeah,
totally. Seeing them in a new way.
I think it can just especially an actor playing Hamlet, can very much go into their own head and I can't believe this and I can't believe that. And it's quite nice when you have another actor to bounce that off with in that second circle way that I mentioned before.
So you're now in your life, you now have an agent and you're looking for work.
Yep.
So if any of our listeners have any plays coming up or films they'd like to make, you can contact Christopher Hamilton.
Absolutely, please do.
I think it's lovely that you're carrying Shakespeare inside you.
I think so too. And I think also for the longest time, it's something that I myself pushed away out of fear of not being able to understand it, not being able to perform it, immediately jumping to the conclusion that it's extremely elitist, as if it's like...
not, but he wrote for the plebs, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's remembering that. It's a bit like opera. Everyone thinks that opera is for rich geezers. But actually it's only become that.
I mean, it wasn't until the 18th century that Shakespeare very much became for the
highbrow.
Yeah, totally. And that's kind of our perception of it now. But even today, I think that there are productions of Shakespeare that are much more palatable for like the masses and stuff. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I really enjoy carrying these monologues around, and also just the way that they're written. They have that, the da-dum, 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 da-dum. They stick with you because of that as well.
And in your writing, I know you've been preparing to write your own play recently. Have you considered whether to use iambic pentameter and to make it a verse form, or are you sticking with plain English? How are you approaching that task?
I mean, it's not something I had considered because I think a lot of my characters speak as close as they can to everyday speech, of course, with a little bit of dramatic flair. Yeah. But I think it is something interesting to put into a play because it adds something that an audience can just feel anyway. That certain rhythm, and it's all based on the heartbeat. So maybe there might be some space for it, if not something kind of quite stylistic that can come out. I quite like plays that don't go too abstract. I quite like plays that are very much based in reality. But I do like it when a play starts in reality, and then because the emotions of the characters become so heightened, you enter this abstract space. So maybe there is a place for that in some of the plays that I'm writing, for sure.
Yeah, and it's nice sometimes when, as you say, emotions get really heightened and then people slip into a type of dreamscape, like Hamlet did into seeing the ghost of his father,
Totally. Well, it's like in a musical, they break out into song when the emotions get too high, and that's what it is. And there's a quote, and I don't know who it's from originally, but there is the quote that in a musical when I'm completely butchering it now. I've completely lost the quote. But it's when the emotions are so high and when you can no longer speak, sing. That's it. And that's what happens in a musical. This coming from somebody who my preference is not usually for musicals, which is such a shame because when I actually go and see one in the theatre, inevitably I do just end up really enjoying it and having a great time.
Yeah. We went to see Les Miserables. I'd never seen it before.
Oh, yeah?
At Christmas. And we were all walking on air after it. It was just so incredibly emotional and sublime. Underrated form, musicals.
I think so. Although a lot of the circles I travel in are full of musical theatre actors, and so I see a lot of actors and performers in those, and they live it, they breathe it. A friend of mine is in The Lion King, and just absolutely loves it. Despite it being the most physically draining show. Totally thrives off it. So
absolutely, imagine on a complete emotional high every day.
Yeah.
So Christopher, it's been so lovely to hear you talking about Shakespeare and your life and acting. It's been wonderful. I wonder if you would, for our listeners now, read the soliloquy again so that they can hear it in your context.
Absolutely, yeah. To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, by opposing, end them, to die, to sleep, no more, by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. It is a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come, we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life.
Wow, thank you so much, Christopher. And I really wish you loads of luck in your career as an actor.
Thank you, Helen. And appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming on to Elixir.
Happily. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
If you're a regular listener and are enjoying the podcast, it would mean the world to me if you could hit the follow button on your podcast app. And if you have a moment, leave a review and a 5-star rating. Remember, you can find the poems that feature in each episode on my website, helenwing.com. If you'd like to support the production costs of our Elixir Poetry podcast, please feel free to buy me a coffee. Thanks for listening.